education, training, and other reasonable measures to make this country safer for all its people, whether they be legal gun owners or those who choose not to own a firearm. Why is it that some of us feel the need to own a gun? Most gun owners say they need to own a firearm for their personal protection, or perhaps more specifically, protection from other people with guns. With over 400 million guns in this country, more guns than the population of the United States, it makes some sense to worry about being attacked by someone with one of these weapons. Some gun owners may also say that they want to protect themselves from an armed assailant breaking into their home. This statement sounds reasonable on the surface and makes some sense on some level, because there are in fact a few cases in which a homeowner has successfully used a weapon to defend themselves against an intruder looking to do them harm. Unfortunately, there are also many cases where gun owners have accidentally killed their loved ones or other innocent people thinking they were armed intruders. One could also balance the possibility of shooting an armed assailant in your home with the staggering number of gun owners who end up taking their own lives using their own weapon. Let us examine some other possible reasons why some gun owners feel a need to own a weapon. There are those who think that society is heading towards some type of civil unrest. Civil unrest is certainly a possibility, especially when a society has access to over 400 million firearms and is politically, racially, and economically divided in such a way that tensions are allowed to escalate to the point where mass violence is becoming a very real possibility. If this nation does erupt in a violent civil war, it's highly unlikely that anyone, gun owners or those who do not own a weapon, will be able to protect their personal property or even their lives against hundreds of thousands or perhaps millions of people on a violent rampage. Those with weapons will most likely just add to the chaos and bring about even more death and destruction. There are also some gun owners that have a fundamental distrust of government. For those who may be genuinely paranoid and frightened of their own government, here are a couple of reasons why these fears may not be altogether rational. First, the government of the United States is made up of U.S. citizens, duly elected by the people of this great nation. Of the people, by the people, and for the people. Are not those the words used by Abraham Lincoln to describe the government of the United States? So why would anyone in the right mind fear a government that is made up of their fellow citizens? Second, our duly elected government officials are backed and protected by the greatest military force on this planet. It seems a little foolish for anyone to think that they could take on the U.S. military and win. The need to own a firearm seems to revolve around one of our most powerful human emotions, namely fear. Whether this fear and the danger associated with it is real is a discussion we could have on another day at another time. The point here is not to argue with those who insist on owning a gun because they have some sort of deep-seated, perhaps real or unreal fear. The point is that there are just too many people who own a gun who probably should not be allowed to be anywhere near one. The goal of this book is to improve gun safety, which, in turn, will help to improve the safety of every person in this nation. Guns, by design, are built to inflict great bodily harm and or kill the person being shot. An important question, and one that must be asked, is this: should everyone in this country be allowed to own a firearm? Some people think the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution means that we all have a right to own a gun. The fact is, even today, there are many exceptions to this so-called basic fundamental right to bear arms. Not everyone has a legal right to own a gun. Our constitutional right generally implies that every person in the country is entitled to enjoy it. Let us examine a few of our most treasured constitutional rights to see if they have any restrictions. Freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and freedom of religion are three of our most important and fundamental constitutional rights, But even these have certain exceptions and limitations. For instance, you cannot yell fire in a crowded theater. This means that there's a limit to our freedom of speech, one of our most sacred and precious constitutional rights. A free press cannot print or broadcast libelous and/or slanderous statements without facing serious legal and financial ramifications. One's freedom of religion does not extend to those who perform human sacrifices, even though this practice may be part of their religious tradition. These examples show us that none of our constitutional rights are guaranteed, absolute, unquestionable, inalienable, and unconditional. There are limits to all of our constitutional rights, and this includes our so-called right to bear arms. At best, it remains a conditional right. The Second Amendment of the Constitution says, "A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." These words have been interpreted many times and in many ways. It's not worth going over and rehashing this argument once again. The intention of this book is not to figure out what the Second Amendment of the Constitution means. The Supreme Court is charged with making that determination. For the sake of argument, let's assume the Second Amendment of the Constitution means that a private individual has the right to bear arms. Even if the statement were true, this does not mean that this or any constitutional right is unconditional. The real question is not whether we have a constitutional right to bear arms. The real question should be instead, who should be allowed to legally own a gun? The answer to this question should be obvious to most people. Not everyone is or should be allowed to legally own a weapon. For instance, convicted felons lose their right to own a firearm. If you're diagnosed with certain mental health conditions, you also lose your right to legally own a weapon. If you're deemed to be a danger to yourself or others, you're also denied the right to own a gun. If an order of protection is filed against you, you suddenly lose your right to possess a weapon. These are just a few examples of people who have lost their Second Amendment right to bear arms. This means that not everyone is legally entitled to own and possess a firearm. So who exactly should be allowed to legally own a weapon? Perhaps a better question might be, who should not be legally qualified to own a gun? For instance, should someone who has made a death threat be allowed to own a firearm? Should someone who has been convicted of committing a violent assault against another person have a right to own a gun? What about those who physically abuse a romantic partner, a roommate, a spouse, a neighbor, a stranger, or anyone for that matter? Should they be permitted to enjoy their right to own a deadly weapon? What about someone who has abused a child, or someone with an extremely bad temper who is forced to attend anger management classes? Should these individuals be allowed to own a firearm? What about someone who is thought to be suicidal? Should they continue to have a right to own a gun? What about someone who does not know how to properly handle or use a gun? Should they be allowed to own a gun? What about a blind person? Do they have a right to own a gun? What about a person with very low intelligence? Should they be given the right to own a weapon? What about those gun owners who leave their weapons in the reach of children? Should they be denied their right to own a firearm? What if someone's feeling extremely depressed? Should they be entitled to own a gun? What if someone uses methamphetamines and is experiencing extreme paranoia? Should they be given the right to own a firearm? Who exactly should be legally qualified to own a gun? There are many people for a variety of reasons who should not be allowed to own a firearm. So who among us should decide who may legally own a weapon? Presented in the next section of this book will be an innovative proposal that may help us decide just who should or should not be allowed to legally purchase, own, or possess a firearm. The Gun Ownership Panel. Just about everyone seems to agree that our elected officials should not be left with the responsibility of deciding who may legally own a gun. Perhaps, instead, A professional, nonpartisan gun ownership panel could be assembled. This panel could come together to discuss and debate who exactly should be permitted to legally own a firearm. This panel could be made up of current and former police officers, ATF and FBI agents, along with knowledgeable, open-minded, and experienced gun owners, and those who do not own a weapon. This professional gun panel would come together on a regular basis to discuss and debate who exactly should or should not be allowed to legally own a firearm. These discussions and debates would take place in front of a public audience. Members of the public would be allowed to ask questions or make comments and suggestions in real time via email during the panel's discussion and debate period, after which there would be time set aside for the public comments, where anyone who wishes to be heard will once again be allowed to actively participate. They will be invited to ask questions and offer their insights, opinions, and any other input they may have at this time. This would be done via email or in person at the meeting. Everyone who wishes to be heard will get a chance to voice their opinion. Once the panel has finished their discussion and debate, and the public has had a chance to ask questions and make comments, the panel will then proceed to take a vote to decide who exactly will have the legal right to own a firearm. This vote will take place in public for all to witness. The vote will be based on a majority rule system. There will only be limited seating available in the room where the panel will be assembling. Therefore, this meeting will also be broadcast live via the internet. This will make it convenient for anyone who wishes to watch the panel's discussion, debate, and decision-making procedures on their electronic devices. Those viewing the meeting online will have the ability to voice their opinions and ask any questions they may have via email during the debate and discussion session and during the time set aside for public comments. These meetings will take place every 6 months. Next, we will look at some of the ways in which society can make gun ownership a little safer for both gun owners and those who choose not to own a firearm. A proposal that all gun owners be required to attend and successfully complete a gun safety course will be discussed in the following chapter. Gun safety education. It seems only logical that if you insist on owning a gun, you should probably know how to use it as safely as possible. A firearm is inherently dangerous, especially if the person who is using the weapon has not been taught the fundamentals of gun safety. A firearm can also be deadly not only to the gun owner, but to everyone else if it is not handled safely and correctly. Owning a gun in many ways is like owning an automobile. One needs to learn how to drive a car safely before getting behind the wheel and taking it on the highway. Much like the owner of an automobile who learns to drive safely, the owner of a firearm must also learn to use their weapon safely. To accomplish this goal, all gun owners will be required to attend a gun safety course, where they'll be taught how to handle their weapon as safely as possible. All gun owners will be required to learn how to safely handle and use their firearms. This gun safety course will be designed in such a way that gun owners will be able to learn more about their weapons and how to use them as safely as possible. All gun owners will be required to attend and pass this online gun safety course before they'll be allowed to legally purchase or possess a firearm. This gun safety course will be very easy to attend because it will be conducted completely online. It can be taken in the comfort of your own home using a computer or some other electronic device connected to the internet. This course will be taught by a highly trained and experienced professional instructor. This instructor will teach this course live. This means that they will be available to answer any questions the class may have quickly and in real time. This course will cover all facets of gun safety, including how to store a weapon safely and securely. This gun safety course will consist of 2 5-hour classes taught over 2 consecutive days. This course will cost $50 to attend. To make sure that those in attendance understand all the information being taught, there will be a quiz given after each section of the course. In addition to these quizzes, there will also be a final examination administered at the end of each staged class. These final exams will cover all the material taught that day. Once the gun owner has completed this online gun safety course and has successfully passed all the quizzes and final exam, they'll be awarded a certificate of completion. For all those who may already own a gun, they will also be required to pass this gun safety course and earn a certificate of completion before they'll be legally qualified to own or possess a firearm. For all prospective gun owners, they will need to pass this gun safety course prior to purchasing a firearm. For those gun owners who have successfully passed this gun safety course, they will be required by law to renew their certification each year. Once a gun owner has successfully taken this class, they will only be required to pass the quizzes and final exams in order to be recertified and receive their certification of completion. The cost to take only the quizzes and final exam portions of this course will be $25. Now, if those who have successfully passed this course choose to take only the quizzes and final exams and fail any of these various tests, they'll need to be required to retake the entire online gun safety course once again. While retaking this course, they will be given a second chance to retake the quizzes and final exams, and then upon successful completion of this gun safety course, they'll receive a certificate of completion and be recertified. The cost to retake the entire course will be $50. In order to own a weapon legally, all gun owners will also be required to comply with the rest of the legal requirements before they'll be eligible to apply for their gun license. These requirements will be explained more in depth in the following chapters of this book. Among these legal requirements is for all gun owners to attend a certified firing range and take a weapons training course where they will learn how to safely handle and fire their weapons. Weapons Training Course. The next step in the process of receiving a license to legally own a gun is to learn how to handle a weapon safely and correctly. This means that each person who wants to legally own a firearm will be required to visit a certified firing range and take a weapons training course where they will learn how to safely and properly handle and use their weapon. At these certified firing ranges, there will be several highly trained professionals who are extremely knowledgeable about guns and gun safety, who will instruct prospective gun owners and those who may already own a weapon how to handle safely and fire a weapon. These highly trained and experienced professionals will take them through a detailed and thorough step-by-step process of learning how to handle their weapons safely. The instructors will teach each gun owner how to clean, disassemble, assemble, and safely load and unload their firearm. Every gun owner will have to demonstrate to their instructors that they know how to handle their weapons safely and correctly. Each gun owner will then be taught how to properly fire their weapons accurately. Every gun owner will need to demonstrate to the instructor's satisfaction that they are proficient in every aspect of using their firearm. The instructors at the firing range will also play another very important role besides just teaching people how to use their weapons safely. They will also be trained to be on the lookout for anyone who may be going through some sort of serious mental health crisis. These are individuals who should not be anywhere near a firearm. For instance, if someone comes to the firing range and says something bizarre or is behaving unusually or erratically in some way, that may indicate that they have some sort of serious mental or emotional problems. These instructors will notify the Bureau of Firearm Enforcement, who will then send out a team of specially trained officers who will determine whether this individual will be allowed to continue to own a weapon. The Bureau of Firearm Enforcement will be discussed in greater detail later in this book. In order to evaluate a person who is behaving in such a way that may indicate that they are experiencing some sort of serious mental health issues, these Bureau of Firearm Enforcement officers will first speak with the individual in order to evaluate their present state of mind. They will then administer a psychological test to see if this person is mentally stable enough to own a firearm. This psychological test will also be discussed and explained more in depth later in this book. If these Bureau of Firearm Enforcement officers determine that this person is just too dangerous or mentally unstable to own a weapon, they'll immediately confiscate their firearms for a minimum of 12 months. In order to reacquire their weapons, these individuals must first complete a comprehensive psychological assessment and evaluation administered by a licensed board-certified psychologist or psychiatrist and be deemed mentally competent and emotionally stable enough to own a weapon. They'll also be required to appear before an administrative judge where they'll need to demonstrate once again that they are mentally competent and emotionally stable enough to own a firearm. These administrative judges and the administrative hearings they preside over will also be discussed in more detail later in this book. The cost of attending this weapons training course at the firing range will vary, depending on several factors. For gun owners with only one weapon, the cost of this weapons training course will be $75. If a gun owner has more than one weapon, they'll need to pay an additional fee for each gun. The cost for each additional weapon will be $25. The cost of renting a space at the firing range will be approximately $20 an hour. The cost of ammunition used at the firing range will not be included in the cost of this weapons training course. Gun owners may choose to bring their own ammunition to the firing range. After learning the basics of gun safety, all gun owners will be encouraged to practice firing their weapons until they feel comfortable handling their firearms and can consistently hit a target with some degree of accuracy. After sufficient practice firing their weapon, all gun owners will then be required to fire at least 100 rounds, hitting a target accurately at a measured distance at least 90% of the time. Only those gun owners who have successfully completed this weapons training course and have learned to handle their gun safely and can fire their weapon proficiently and accurately will be qualified to begin the process of applying for a gun license and legally registering their weapon. All gun owners will be required to attend this weapons training course at least one time. Once a gun owner has successfully completed and passed this course and received their certificate of completion, they will then be certified for 1 year. When it's time to renew their certification, they'll only need to go to the firing range and demonstrate to the instructor's satisfaction that they still remember how to handle their weapon safely and correctly. They'll also be required to fire a minimum of 100 rounds at a target placed at a measured distance, hitting it at least 90% of the time. After completing these requirements, the gun owner will receive their certificate of completion and be recertified. The cost of recertification will be $40 for the first weapon and $15 for each additional weapon, plus the cost of renting a space at the firing range. Again, all ammunition used at the firing range will be paid for by the gun owner. In the next chapter, there will be a discussion as to why all gun owners will be required to purchase, carry, and maintain minimum liability firearm insurance. Firearm insurance. If you own an automobile, you're required by law to purchase a minimum liability automobile insurance policy before you're permitted to legally drive your car on the highway. This legal requirement to purchase, carry, and maintain a minimum liability automobile insurance policy has been put in place in case the owner of the automobile is involved in an accident and damages someone else's car or injures another person. A gun, much like a car, is potentially very dangerous and can seriously injure and or kill another person. In fact, when a firearm is used in a way that it is designed, it can and often does inflict great bodily harm and or kills the person being shot. Therefore, it only makes sense that those who choose to own a gun be required by law to carry minimum liability firearm insurance policy that covers both their weapons and themselves against accidental injury or death. The cost of this type of insurance will depend on several factors. One factor includes the level of firearm liability insurance one may wish to carry. For instance, if you have a great deal of monetary assets, it may be a good idea to carry additional firearm insurance in order to help protect those assets in case you are sued. Insurance rates will vary depending on your individual circumstances. For instance, if you have been convicted of driving while intoxicated, your firearm insurance will likely be much more expensive. This is because your behavior and judgment have now been called into question. If you choose to drive drunk, what's to stop you from also handling a gun while intoxicated? Another group of individuals who will likely need to pay more for their firearm insurance are those who have been ordered to attend anger management counseling. These individuals may be seen by gun insurers as more of a threat to use deadly force than someone who does not have anger management issues. These are just a couple of examples of individuals who may have to pay more for their firearm insurance policy. For a gun owner who has never been in trouble with the law, the cost of minimum liability firearm insurance policy will be less than $20 per month. If someone is caught in possession of a gun and does not have proof that they have a valid minimum liability firearm insurance policy, they will immediately lose their right and privilege to own a gun, and all their firearms will be confiscated for a minimum of 12 months. They will also be fined up to $1,000, and they may be sent to prison for up to 6 months. In order to reacquire their weapons, they must appear before an administrative judge and demonstrate that they have complied with all these new gun regulations before their weapons may be returned. The next chapter of this book will explain how to obtain a gun license. Gun license. All gun owners will be required to have a valid gun license to legally own or possess a weapon. A license to own a gun will be valid for 12 months, and it will need to be renewed each year. The fee to obtain a gun license will be $25 per year. Prior to receiving a gun license, all gun owners will be required to complete all of the following legal requirements. In order to receive a gun license, you must first successfully pass a certified online gun safety course, then go to a certified firing range and pass a weapons training course where you will learn to properly handle and fire a weapon. Next, you will pay an annual gun licensing fee, register each of your weapons and pay a registration fee for each firearm, purchase a minimum liability firearm insurance policy, purchase and use a gun safe, and have your name submitted to the continuous background check system. This new background check system will be explained in greater detail later in this book. In addition to the above requirements, all gun owners must also pass at least one psychological test each year. This test will also be discussed more in depth later in this book. Once the gun owner has successfully completed all these legal requirements, they will then be issued a gun license to own a firearm. All these legal requirements to own a firearm must be completed before one is issued a gun license. This legal right privilege to own a firearm is conditional and based on complying with all these new regulations. Next, the requirement for all gun owners to purchase and use a gun safe will be discussed in more detail in the following chapter. Gun safe. All gun owners will be required to purchase and use a gun safe in order to safely store their weapons. Before you may legally own a weapon or have one in your possession, you must prove that you have the means to store it safely. This means that all gun owners must not only prove that they own a gun safe, but they use it on a consistent basis. If you fail to purchase or use a gun safe, you'll be in violation of the law, at which time you will lose ownership of your firearms for 12 months, face a fine of $1,000, and could be imprisoned for up to 6 months. One of the main reasons for requiring gun owners to keep their firearms stored in a gun safe is to prevent anyone who is not licensed and trained to handle a weapon safely from gaining access to the weapon, and then accidentally or intentionally shooting themselves or some other innocent person. Locking up a firearm could also save the life of a child. Whenever a child comes across a loaded weapon, there's a good chance that they'll end up accidentally shooting someone. That person may be themselves or some other innocent person in the vicinity. A gun safe may also prevent a burglar from easily stealing your weapons. If a burglar does steal your weapons, it's very likely that your guns will end up being used to commit other crimes such as armed robbery or perhaps even murder. Therefore, it makes good sense on so many different levels that all gun owners secure their weapons in a gun safe when they're not being used. Now that a system has been put in place to educate and license legal gun owners, what can be done about all those who don't follow these new laws and are found to be in possession of an illegal firearm? First off, common sense tells us that not everyone will obey the law and comply with these new regulations. Now, if someone chooses not to comply with these new regulations and is found to be in possession of an illegal firearm, they'll be in violation of the law. The penalties for those found to be in possession of an illegal firearm will include immediate forfeiture of their weapons for at least 12 months. They'll also be arrested and could face 6 months in prison and may be fined up to $1,000. To ensure that legal gun owners and those who do not choose to own a weapon are protected from anyone in possession of an illegal firearm, a new law enforcement agency will be created in charge of arresting all those who are in possession of illicit firearms. This new law enforcement agency will be known as the Bureau of Firearm Enforcement. The Bureau of Firearm Enforcement will be discussed more in depth in the following chapter. The Bureau of Firearm Enforcement. The Bureau of Firearm Enforcement will work to identify anyone who does not or no longer has a legal right to own or possess a gun. The Bureau of Firearm Enforcement will be charged with locating, confiscating all illegal weapons, and arresting anyone who may be in possession of them. These new law enforcement officers will be extremely proactive. They'll work diligently to locate and arrest anyone in possession of an illegal firearm. The Bureau of Firearm Enforcement will be a new federal law enforcement agency made up of 30,000 well-educated and extremely well-trained officers. These officers will focus on locating, confiscating, and arresting anyone found in possession of an illegal weapon. These officers will go to the homes and businesses of anyone who is known to be or suspected of being in possession of an illegal firearm. One group of individuals who lack the legal right to own a gun and thus may be in possession of an illegal firearm are those who have been convicted of a felony. After being released from prison, all felons will receive a visit from the officers of the Bureau of Firearm Enforcement. These individuals will continue to be closely monitored by the Bureau for the rest of their lives. Another group of individuals who are likely to be in possession of an illegal weapon are known gang members. They'll also be targeted by the Bureau of Firearm Enforcement. These 30,000 newly sworn federal officers will have the power to question anyone that they suspect may be in possession of an illicit weapon. Armed with a search warrant, these officers will have the legal authority to search homes and/or businesses of anyone suspected of being in possession of an illegal firearm. If they find someone in possession of an illegal firearm, they'll immediately arrest them and confiscate their weapons. These individuals will also lose their right to own a firearm for at least 12 months, face up to 6 months in prison, and be fined up to $1,000. Whenever a law enforcement official or agency gets credible information of someone who may be in possession of an illegal firearm, this person will receive a visit from the officers of the Bureau of Firearm Enforcement to check and see if they have a legal right to own a gun. Enforcement will be an extension of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, also known as the ATF. These new Bureau of Firearm Enforcement officers will have a presence in every city across the country, but their primary focus will be in those areas with the highest rates of gun violence. Again, these Bureau of Firearm Enforcement officers will only be searching for those who are known to be or suspected of being in possession of an illegal firearm. This means that legal gun owners will not have to worry about the Bureau or its officers coming to their homes or places of business. These 30,000 new federal officers will start their career earning around $80,000 a year. The cost of paying the salaries of these officers will be approximately $2.4 billion per year. In order to pay the salaries of these Bureau of Firearm Enforcement officers, every gun owner will be required to pay a yearly registration fee of $10 for each weapon that they own. Since there are over 400 million guns in the United States, charging the owners of these weapons a $10 yearly registration fee for each gun that they own will raise approximately $4 billion each year. This gun registration fee will be used to pay not only the salaries of these Bureau officers, but will also cover the cost of their training and all their administrative costs associated with operating this agency. In the next chapter, our present background check system will be discussed and critiqued. Background checks revisited. Even to these background checks revisited. Even today, not everyone who wants to have a gun is legally qualified to purchase, possess, or allowed to own one. Even though the Second Amendment of the Constitution has been interpreted to mean that private individuals have been given the right to purchase and own a weapon, there are numerous exceptions to this so-called right. Before anyone is permitted to purchase or take possession of a firearm, they are legally required to go through and pass a thorough background check. In addition, if anyone wishes to purchase a handgun, they must also wait 15 days before they're allowed to take possession of their weapon. Our present background check system has prevented many individuals with serious legal and/or mental health issues from obtaining a weapon. Unfortunately, this system remains far from perfect. In fact, it has at least one major and very serious flaw. It only checks the backgrounds of gun owners once, when they first purchase their weapon. So what happens if a gun owner is no longer qualified to own a weapon after going through their initial background check? Not much. Our present background check system is broken and in desperate need of repair. It needs to be updated to meet the needs of the 21st century. The current system is antiquated, inadequate, and needs to be revamped and completely reconceived. We need to rethink our present system and develop a whole new approach, thinking of new and innovative ways to improve this system. A background check system needs to have the ability to quickly and efficiently, in real time, inform law enforcement when a person is neither qualified or eligible to legally own or possess a weapon. The continuous background check system is designed to accomplish all these tasks. This new system will be explained in greater detail in the following 2 chapters. But first, let's take a closer look and examine why it is that certain individuals may not be good candidates to own a firearm. Not all people should be allowed to own a gun. There are numerous reasons why certain individuals should not be allowed to be anywhere near a deadly weapon. First off, we are all human beings, and because we are human, we all tend to get very angry or very emotional on occasion. What this means is that we're all born with a tendency to lose control every now and then. We all share this propensity, and therefore it could be argued that no human being should ever be allowed to own such a dangerous weapon. In other words, owning a gun may be just too dangerous for most people, given our tenuous emotional and psychological makeup. Another interesting facet of being human is that we all tend to change somewhat over time. Sometimes this change is for the better, and sometimes it's for the worse. It seems that almost every person experiences some sort of serious emotional, physical, psychological, or financial difficulties at one time or another over the course of their life. Any one of these serious difficulties has the potential to send a person over the edge. Once someone reaches this point, it may cause them to have an explosive emotional reaction. Some of us, at different times in our lives, become susceptible to serious emotional problems. These serious emotional difficulties can sometimes overwhelm us. Life is full of serious challenges. Here's an example of a man who is now facing an emotional crisis and has suddenly become a danger to himself. William is an 80-year-old man who has just lost his wife of 56 years to cancer. William feels an intense sense of loss, tremendous grief, and an overwhelming sadness. With this grief, sadness, and loss also comes extreme depression and recurring thoughts of suicide. 25 years ago, William purchased a handgun and passed his background check with flying colors. Unfortunately, today, William is not the same man that purchased that handgun 25 years ago. Now, in his present state of mind, he is no longer someone who should be in possession of a deadly weapon. The circumstances in his life have changed drastically, and he's no longer the same person who easily passed his background check. The truly unfortunate part of this story is that if this man wished to purchase a gun today, he could still easily pass his background check and acquire a weapon. Think about it. Should William have access to a firearm in his present state of mind? If this man wished to purchase a gun today, he could still easily pass his background check and acquire a weapon. Think about it. Should William have access to a firearm in his present state of mind? Here's another example of someone who should not be anywhere near a dangerous weapon. This is a story of a young man named Stephen. At 18, Stephen successfully passed a background check and waited 15 days before receiving his handgun. At that time, he was thought to be of sound mind and legally qualified to own a gun. Stephen is now 22 years old. Recently, Stephen has begun having a series of serious mental health issues. He's hearing voices in his head, and he's been experiencing a variety of bizarre delusions. He thinks God is speaking directly to him through these voices. Stephen is still a legal gun owner, but He should not be in possession of a lethal weapon at this point in his life. Unless Stephen sees a psychiatrist and is subsequently diagnosed with a serious mental illness, he'll continue to retain his right to own a gun. Perhaps someone concerned about this young man will notify law enforcement so that they can go to his home and conduct a mental health evaluation. After speaking with him, they may determine that he is a danger to himself or to others and seek to hospitalize him. Only at this point will authorities have the right to confiscate his handgun. Here's another scenario of someone who may no longer be a good candidate to own a firearm. He's a 45-year-old man named Joe who's been diligently working at his job for over 25 years. Yesterday, his wife left him for another man. Joe is beside himself and become extremely angry, jealous, and depressed. His performance at work begins deteriorating to the point where he ends up getting fired. This is the last straw. Thoughts of suicide and death are now racing through Joe's mind. Constant and persistent thoughts of revenge overwhelm and consume him. The solution to his problems seems simple. He'll shoot his ex-wife and her new boyfriend, and then go to his former place of employment where he'll shoot his boss and co-workers and then himself. Joe is still a legal gun owner. He passed his background check 15 years ago. Today, he's a danger to himself and others and should not be anywhere near a weapon. Unless and until someone notifies the authorities, this man will continue to be legally qualified to own a gun. Endless scenarios and examples could be given of various individuals suffering from a vast array of psychological and emotional problems who are literally on the edge, who may see killing themselves or others with a gun as not only a real possibility, but as the only way to solve their problems. These are people who may take it to the next level and end up shooting someone. This may be themselves, someone else, or even perhaps many other innocent people. So what can we do to prevent these needless deaths? One solution is to develop a whole new background check system, one with teeth. What we need is a continuous background check system. How this new system works and how it will be implemented will be explained more in depth in the following chapter. Introducing the continuous background check system. Under our current laws, in order to purchase and legally own a gun, you must submit to and successfully pass a background check. If you're purchasing a handgun, you must also wait 15 days before taking possession of your new weapon. The idea behind our current background check system makes some sense in theory. Checking potential gun owners for serious legal and mental health issues that may disqualify them from owning a gun sounds like a good idea. Unfortunately, having someone go through a thorough background check only one time when they first purchase their weapon is wholly inadequate. What if this person later becomes mentally unstable or legally disqualified to own a weapon? There are far too many people who have successfully passed their background checks and then only later ended up having serious emotional, mental, and/or legal issues that would have disqualified them from passing that same background check if they were forced to go through it once again. In other words, these mental, emotional, and legal red flags would have been detected quite easily if these individuals were required to go through the same background check again. This one-time only background check system is broken. It's wholly deficient and totally inadequate in its present form. There are far too many individuals who passed their initial background checks who only later ended up using their weapons to harm, maim, or kill others. Our current background check system is inherently flawed and poorly designed. Checking the background of those seeking to purchase a firearm only once is not only totally inadequate but extremely dangerous. It's time that we develop a whole new background check system. What should take the place of our present background check system? a newer, more efficient and thoughtful system needs to be developed and put in place. One that can quickly identify anyone who is not legally qualified or is no longer eligible to own a firearm. This new system needs to be able to, in real time, conduct a continuous background check on all gun owners. This means checking their status as a legal gun owner at the time of their initial gun purchase, and then continuously rechecking it throughout their entire lifetime. This new background check system will incorporate the latest in artificial intelligence and high-speed computer technology, enabling it to quickly and easily detect all those who are not or no longer legally qualified to own a weapon. This new system will instantaneously notify proper authorities about anyone who is no longer qualified or legal to own a firearm. This system may give the authorities the time they need to take appropriate action before deadly shooting takes place. This new continuous background check system will take the place of our present one-time-only background check system. An explanation of just how this new continuous background check system will operate will be discussed at length in the following chapter. The continuous background check system. So, how will this new continuous background check system work? All legal gun owners and all those who wish to purchase a weapon will be required to submit their passport, state-issued driver's license, or some other type of official government-issued identification to their local law enforcement officials, who will then enter their names into the continuous background check system database. The continuous background check system database will be connected to all local, national, and international law enforcement databases. Now, say a gun owner gets arrested and charged with a serious crime. Their name will be entered into the police department's computer database, where it will be instantly transmitted to the continuous background check system database. The continuous background check system will then notify local authorities and/or the Bureau of Firearm Enforcement, who will then go out and confiscate this incarcerated individual's weapons. The continuous background check system will continuously check the records of all gun owners for any serious violations of law and/or any severe mental health conditions that may disqualify a person from owning a weapon. In other words, it will continuously check the backgrounds of all gun owners in order to determine whether they are still legally qualified to own a weapon. The continuous background check system will also work in conjunction with mental health specialists who will help identify those who may be in need and suffering from extreme, debilitating mental health crises. These mental health specialists will be mandated reporters. This means that psychologists, psychiatrists, and other mental health specialists will be required by law to report a client who is in possession of a firearm and is having serious mental health crisis to law enforcement. Reportable mental health issues will include, but are not limited to, clients suffering from suicidal ideation, those who are psychotic and/or delusional, and anyone who may be a threat to themselves or others. The goal of the continuous background check system is to fill in the gaps left by our present background check system. Our current system only checks the backgrounds of gun owners once, when they initially purchase their firearms. Continuously checking the backgrounds of all gun owners will help to overcome this very serious flaw in our present system. The continuous background check system is not a perfect system by any stretch of the imagination. It will not stop all gun violence. This is because it can only react to a situation after the fact. A more perfect system would have the capability to prevent all gun crimes before they occur. Ideally, preventing gun crimes is the goal, but to accomplish this would require having knowledge of an event prior to it happening. In the next chapter, psychological testing will be examined and explained in more detail. Psychological testing requirement. Anyone who wishes to purchase or own a firearm legally will be required to pass a specially designed psychological test. This means that all gun owners will be required to pass a psychological test before they'll be allowed to apply for or renew their gun license. These psychological tests will be short, approximately 20-25 questions. They'll be designed to accurately identify those who may not be of sound mind and therefore should not be allowed to own a firearm. These tests will be developed by a team of highly qualified research scientists working with psychologists and psychiatrists who specialize in the design and production of these types of tests. These experts will develop a series of 10 different tests. If there were only one test, it may be possible to memorize the answers. Therefore, there will be 10 similar but different tests. Each of these tests will be designed to quickly and accurately identify those struggling with serious mental health issues. Mentally stable gun owners need not worry about taking one of these psychological tests. They will not be difficult to pass if the person taking it is of sound mind. These psychological tests will be carried and used by law enforcement officers in instances where they may be called upon to perform psychological assessment of a gun owner who may be experiencing serious psychological difficulties. Law enforcement officers will be able to administer one of these psychological evaluation tests to anyone they suspect may be mentally unstable. These officers would then be in a better position to determine whether this gun owner should be allowed to continue to own or possess a weapon. If the gun owner either refuses to take the test or fails it, they'll immediately lose their right to own or possess a weapon, and their firearms will be confiscated for a minimum of 12 months. In order to reacquire their weapon, they must pass a comprehensive psychological evaluation conducted by a licensed, board-certified psychologist or psychiatrist. They'll also be required to go before an administrative judge and demonstrate that they are mentally competent and stable enough to own or possess a weapon. Every gun owner will be required to take and pass a psychological test at least once every 12 months in order to qualify for a gun license or gun license renewal. In the next chapter, a detailed explanation of what an administrative hearing is and why individuals may be required to attend one. Administrative hearings. If a gun owner loses their right to legally own a firearm and their guns are confiscated by law enforcement, after 12 months, the former gun owner will be given a chance to have their weapons returned to them after an administrative hearing is conducted. These administrative hearings will be conducted by an administrative judge. At this hearing, the former gun owner will be given an opportunity to make their case as to why they should be allowed to have their weapons returned to them. There are 3 groups of individuals who may lose their legal right to own a firearm. The first group is made up of those who do not or no longer legally qualified to own a weapon because they have been shown to be psychologically unstable. This group includes those deemed to be a danger to themselves or others, or those who fail or refuse to take a psychological test. In order to purchase a firearm or reacquire the weapon they once owned, these individuals must submit to and pass a complete psychological evaluation conducted by a board-certified licensed psychologist or psychiatrist. In addition, they must appear before an administrative judge who will make the final determination as to whether these individuals will have their firearms returned to them. The next group of individuals who have lost their right to legally own a weapon are those who have been arrested or convicted of a serious crime. After waiting 12 months, these individuals will also have an opportunity to appear before an administrative judge to make their case as to why they think they should be allowed to own a firearm. It will be up to the judge to determine whether these former gun owners will have their firearms returned to them. The third group of individuals who have lost their right to own a gun are those who do not complete the legal requirements to own a weapon. After a 12-month waiting period, these individuals will have an opportunity to appear before an administrative judge to make their case as to why they think they should be allowed to have their guns returned to them. Before anyone in any of these 3 groups will be allowed to reacquire their firearms, they will first have to complete all the legal requirements necessary for obtaining a gun license and register each of their weapons. The next chapter looks at why it is so important that each of us stay vigilant of anyone, particularly those with a weapon, who appear to be extremely angry or mentally unstable, and who may be thinking of doing harm to themselves or others. If one sees something, they need to say something to someone in authority. See something, say something. Whenever people have access to firearms, you can almost guarantee that someone will inevitably be shot and or killed. One way in which we can help prevent at least some of these deaths is for the people of this nation to remain vigilant and aware of those who may be experiencing some sort of serious psychological, emotional, physical, or financial problems that may lead them to act out in a violent manner. If you see a person who is struggling emotionally and or behaving irrationally, or you see someone who may be ready to act out in a violent manner, it is critical that each of us speak up and say something to someone, whether that be the local authorities, a mental health specialist, or someone else who may be able to do something to help. We all need to stay alert and be aware of those who may be thinking about committing a violent act against themselves or others. Even if we enact every one of the proposals outlined in this book, there's always someone who may end up using their weapon to harm an innocent person. Conclusion. This book was written at a time when tens of thousands of needless killings are being committed each year by individuals with access to firearms. Our current gun laws are extremely lax and are virtually non-existent. Today, almost anyone can get a gun. There are very few restrictions on who may purchase or own a weapon. We live in a very dangerous time. This book makes various suggestions and proposals that, if enacted in full and made into law across this land, would greatly increase the safety of every person in this great nation, whether that be a gun owner or someone who chooses not to own a weapon. The proposals suggested in this book include all gun owners being required to attend and pass a gun safety course, receive professional instruction on how to safely handle and fire a weapon, purchase and use a gun safe, purchase a minimum liability firearm insurance policy, pass a psychological test at least once every 12 months, submit their name to the continuous background check system, obtain a gun license and pay a yearly licensing fee, register all weapons and pay a yearly registration fee. In addition, develop and implement the Bureau of Firearm Enforcement and have a professional gun panel that would determine who would have legal access to a firearm. These new legal requirements may appear onerous to some, but if you think carefully about each one, you'll very likely conclude that they all make good sense. If we as a nation continue to have hundreds of millions of people with access to hundreds of millions of firearms, we need to make gun ownership as safe as possible for everyone in this country.